Time for is Hopkins.
Here.
Okay, you got Stephen Lewis. Tony Tis.
I'm sorry, I'm having a really hard time catching any audio.
All right. See any changes? Did you? Anything that we needed to? October 12, 20. Old business, trend.
Can you tell me who moved on?
I can't hear the chairman at all.
Neither can I.
I'll third that motion.
All right, we see. Mr. Hunt.
His audio is breaking up, so you can hear like a partial word and then it goes away.
We have a IT.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
now?
Tracy,
I can hear you. I heard that. Maybe somebody else should try talking, see if it's his mic.
Okay.
Had an issue with that.
so there was this traffic.
Ooh.
appreciate your help. Don?
Wise guy. Yeah, I think so.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes, sir.
But now you can't.
It seems like I pick up partial words and then it just blacks out, almost like a short in the mic.
Mr. Martin? People could see the sign like. Sign up there.
Yeah.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And we'll get rid of the echo.
Seems like I'm hearing all your words now.
Remote hear us.
Spell it different this time. Knows how to pick his. Mr. Hopkins?
Remote, can you hear us?
phone or subcommittees? I want to know if we get
Looking for
Tracy, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you good.
I don't know if the folks in the room can. Chris just emailed me and said they're having a problem getting the system rebooted and that we might just have to cancel and call a special meeting.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest something like that. It's not, sounds like there's a short somewhere because I can hear a piece of words and then
Yep.
gone.
I assume Mr. Ballard's not here today. Are you chairing the meeting?
Who?
I don't know who's chairing the meeting either. Because I don't see Mr. Ballard.
I've heard Mr. Ballard.
I thought I did. It kind of
Okay.
sounded like Ryan Lancaster's voice at some point, but that wouldn't make sense.
Okay. Well, Chris is texting me that he's here. So clearly they can hear us. But we just can't hear them. So, okay. Well, just giving you all that are calling in remotely an update. And then if I hear anything more from our city clerk, I'll let you know.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for what it's worth, our city clerk just did text me a photo of Mr. Ballard. He is in the room, sitting in between Mr. Lewis and Mr. Leclerc. So I see we've got full quorum there for sure.
Luke, could we all call in and just listen to what's going on? You're muted.
Thanks, Tracy. I don't think so because I don't know if we'd be calling into the Zoom platform, which is, I think, where I don't think there's a problem with Zoom. I think there's a problem with how the mics are working. So I asked the clerk if they just wanted to start because they have quorum, but we webcast these on YouTube and the audio is not going out as well. So.
Councilman Cavanagh, anybody else remote? Are you able to hear this now?
We are.
Okay, I think we have
Yes.
audio. We will just need another moment or so to get Ms. Carson back online, and we'll be there.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you can hear me, Mr. Kavanagh.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Looks like we are dialed back in. So we've done roll call. Luke Kavanagh joined us, Sean Martin joined us, Lisa Taysom joined us, and Justin Price joined us via Zoom, as well as Tracy Hopkins. We have approved the agenda. There were no changes to the meetings of the minutes of October 12. We were moving on to old business transportation projects. Ms. Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Page 7 of the agenda packet starts the transportation projects updates. A few of the notable updates are the substantial completion of the Meridian Cherry Road to Ustick, Linder, Franklin to Pine, 10-mile Ustick to McMillan. Those projects have reached substantial completion, so you may not see them on your agenda transportation projects update again. You'll notice that Linder Overland to Franklin has been added. This is not a new project. It's one that's been a topic of discussion, but it was not in the project's update memo in the past. The staff communications section will cover a bit more about that. The last notable update is the Eagle Road, Amity to Victory, and the roundabout at Amity. I did combine those two projects as they are combined in the ACHD work plan. The ACHD Commission and City Council had a joint meeting on October 22nd, and this was one of the two projects that was discussed. The other was the Linder Overland to Franklin project. The commission asked City Council to provide a request for direction as related to the next steps, being that the City Council was concerned about the roundabout at Zaldia and some of the pedestrian crossings that were proposed in the plan. The City Council discussed it on October 27th, and their request is summarized in this packet, and there's more information on that in the staff communications as well. Their request was that City Council would encourage ACHD to consider change order enhancements to improve the multi-use pathway crossings. There was also a general request that was sent that going forward, we would communicate more freely on decisions of whether roundabouts or regular intersections are used on projects. That was all the notable updates for the projects. If there are any questions, I can take those.
Commissioners, questions, comments for Ms. Carson?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kavanagh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, just a comment. Wanted to just point out and thank Commissioner Lancaster for coming to our city council meeting virtually last week and sharing some of his insight. I know coming off of that, there was some further sidebar conversations between myself and the council president and the mayor about continuing to refine our asks for this transportation commission. I think this process was designed somewhat to invite participation from the Transportation Commission. We're still figuring some of that out, but Commissioner Lancaster's comments were well heard, and we look forward to continuing to bring more information and more opportunities for the council, or excuse me, the commission to weigh in the future.
Mr. Lancaster?
Mr. Chairman, just wanted to say thank you, Councilman Kavanagh. So you mentioned our commission a few times during the meeting last Tuesday. I appreciate you relaying, the actions and the thoughts of the commission. So thank you for doing that, Councilman.
Mr. Lancaster, it's not an item, and Ms. Carson, I was thinking about this. Is it appropriate to ask, items come before the commission, or does Mr. Lancaster have some ideas, or anyone have ideas on interjecting in that process or expanding? I know you've gone into some detail there on page 8. Is there anything that we could consider further, or just stay tuned?
I think at this point, it's just stay tuned. We'll take each project as they come, and I'll continue to add them to this project update so that you can see when those projects come up and when the design begins.
Okay. I think Mr. Lewis and Mr. Lancaster and other commissioners, drawn on their experience, may be able to add to comments on the project. So we'd appreciate that opportunity.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
I incorrectly said Linder and Overland to Franklin is not in the staff communications. There is more information on the Eagle Road Amity to Victory in the staff communications. So if I can give a brief update on the Linder Road project, the outcome of the joint meeting, it was one of the other 2 items that was discussed, was the Linder Overland to Franklin, including the overpass of I-84. One of the outcomes of the meeting, of the joint meeting, was that a joint letter is going to be sent to the Idaho Transportation Board requesting that the Linder Overland to Franklin project be added to the STIP. The letter will include the city and ACHD, and there may be other parties that we can include as well as we progress.
Very good. Any follow-up with Ms. Carson? Anything else? Okay, old business transportation projects update. We'll check that box. New business, we are not joined by the sergeant, so,
He let me know that he would not be here, but he did not have any updates.
okay. School zone subcommittee update, that would be you, Mr. Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the school subcommittee met prior to this meeting today. Those in attendance were Commissioner Lewis, Commissioner Leckie, Ian Updike from the West Ada School District, and me. We normally have we have police department representative there. As previously mentioned, Sergeant Frazier is unavailable today. And this time we weren't joined by an ACHD representative, but they have been represented in the past and hope that they'll be available in the future. The main topic that we discussed was assigned to us, if you will, at our last meeting a couple weeks ago. Commissioner Hopkins had suggested to the commission that we discuss the Eagle and Taconic proposed roundabout as a future meeting topic. The school subcommittee had discussed topics in the area previously, and so we took this on as well. Just as a reminder, in the past, we had some discussions about school crossings in the vicinity of the Hillsdale School building and the YMCA, with some discussion about Eagle and Taconic, but we addressed it more today. So currently the school district has a walk zone from Sky Mesa, which is on the west side of Eagle Road, to Hillsdale, which is on the east side of Eagle Road. The school district's general practices are, if the road that's crossed is 3 lanes or less, then it's a walk zone. if it's an arterial that's 5 lanes or more than a typical bus zone. So currently, this is a walking area with crosswalk, a pedestrian hybrid beacon, and crossing guard at Taconic. So it's really got lots of bells and whistles currently. And so that's why we didn't discuss it more in the past. Regarding a roundabout and compatibility with school, Commissioner Lewis provided a brochure to the subcommittee, for those of you that are at home. So hopefully you got one of these from Commissioner Lewis. It's titled Roundabouts, a Safer Choice. I provided a page out of the Roundabouts Informational Guide. So this is a national publication, kind of the Bible on roundabouts. And the very first sentence here, it's a one-page document, but it says roundabouts may be an optimal choice for intersection control in the vicinity of schools. Mr. Updike confirmed that the school district isn't in the business of building roads. And so they don't opine on particular designs, but have no particular preference or opposition to roundabouts. We talked about some of the benefits actually of having a roundabout at this location. And again, with the school district having a not a policy, but a general practice of busing if the crossing is 5 lanes or more, that the school district may even look at having a walking zone if a roundabout is there because of the benefits of pedestrian crossings at roundabouts, particularly slower speeds in the roundabout, a shorter crossing distance where the pedestrian only has to look at one direction of traffic rather than 2. And then with the presence of school crossing guard there. We had some discussion, and this is kind of on the tails of the council's discussions and actions on the Eagle and Amity project. So this is a sort of side question out of our subcommittee. But we had some discussion about providing outreach and education with city staff and our elected officials about alternative intersections, perhaps with emphasis on roundabouts. I think there's room for some education and outreach there. So that is perhaps a future meeting topic that I would suggest, or that our subcommittee would suggest for this commission's consideration. I could foresee possible outcomes of this being a commission resolution to the council, perhaps a presentation at a council workshop in the future. The last topic that we discussed were any other school matters. Mr. Updike provided some insight into his job here this fall, this spring and fall. Mentioned that the West Ada School District calendar has changed 5 times because of different circumstances and the challenges that causes. He mentioned, talked some about the shortage of bus drivers, for instance, but this is both a success and a challenge, I'll call it. ACHD controls the school zone flashers, that turn on when school's in session, which is of course dependent on the school district's schedule. And so in the past, that's been very seamless and has worked very well. With the challenges of the changing schedule this year, that coordination's been a little tougher, and admittedly, ACHD has seemed to have trouble keeping up. We have no doubt that they're working very hard to keep up, but just the circumstances make it difficult. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the report from our subcommittee. I'm sure I've missed something, so if there's time, Mr. Chairman, perhaps the other subcommittee members have a few comments to add. But again, the main topic that we talked about was the Eagle and Taconic roundabout, and I guess the idea of our subcommittee and perhaps asking our commission to pursue a statement of support of alternative intersections going forward.
Is there more detail for alternative intersections coming, Mr. Lancaster?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, this is where we start to creep on the scope of our school zone subcommittee. So we'd even appreciate some guidance there as far as, how far our group should pursue this. But personally, I would like to pursue sharing some information about alternative intersections, including roundabouts.
Ms. Carson, is that subject to be assigned to one of the subcommittees?
Mr. Chair, that is your call if you want to assign it. And I can also add it as a future meeting topic for the Transportation Commission as a whole, or we can assign it to a subcommittee.
I was just fleshing out, I'm jumping ahead. My subcommittee would be scheduled to meet next.
So perhaps the projects team, if the school zone doesn't feel like it's necessarily in their realm, because it's not specific to school zones, then perhaps the projects team would want to take it on. I could see that being the next logical choice.
What information would we need to gather?
If it's an education piece, I would say just maybe some options, and then also there's a lot of myths and misconceptions regarding roundabouts. So maybe just some education on how those work for pedestrians, cyclists, motor vehicles, what kind of information there is on the safety of them.
Not being facetious, is that something I would Google, or whose door would?
It is something you can Google. There are about 1 million YouTube videos regarding the safety of roundabouts. But if you wanted one particular group to take it on to write some kind of support statement for roundabouts or just alternative use, that might be a different topic than if we're just saying we want to do an education presentation to the commission. So I'm not sure where the commission wants to go with that, Mr. Chair.
Help me out, Mr. Lancaster. What am I trying to say?
You're on your own for that, Mr. Chairman, but as far as who is involved or a group that's involved, I'm recognizing that this might be outside of the scope of the school subcommittee, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not something that I would not like to pursue, right? So I'm volunteering, Mr. Chairman, having some experience and knowledge on the subject, I guess, but
So if I invite you to the December subcommittee meeting and ask you to bring some materials, I'm assuming that you've got some brochures or some materials that you could bring in and join the discussion in December?
that sounds fine, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hopkins?
I brought that up because the neighborhood in which I live in, the people are pretty much uneducated on the use of roundabouts, especially when, they're just concerned about Eagle Road and the roundabout and their kids crossing the road and the ages of those kids crossing the road and all that kind of stuff. And I thought we'd be ahead of the game if we kind of discussed it. And so I would propose, or I think I would benefit personally from maybe getting some talking points if Mr. Lancaster was willing to just teach us all a little bit of the benefits and of a roundabout in that application.
Sounds like, Mr. Chair, it may be worth having it as a Transportation Commission presentation for the December talk, if Mr. Lancaster thinks he'd be ready in
I'm
December.
thinking that with the quorum rule, because we identified the size of the subcommittees of 4 or less, so that we didn't run afoul of a quorum rule. So
We could have him present to the group as a whole.
would
Mr. Chair.
would December be too soon for you, Mr. Lancaster?
That sounds fine, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hopkins, is there something that you would like to bring, or are you interested in presenting and bringing information, or just education?
I'm having a little tough time hearing you, Mr. Chairman, on your, I hear Mr. Lancaster good, but sometimes you're just a little
Okay.
quiet.
Do you want to present information, or were you asking for the information to be presented for us to discuss at a commission meeting?
The latter. I am not a roundabout expert.
Okay, all right.
Or an engineer.
So, Mr. Lancaster, kind of volunteered you for some extra work. That wasn't my intention.
Mr. Chairman, you haven't volunteered me for anything that I'm not volunteering myself for.
All right, all right. So I guess I'll still have to come up with a December topic for my group then. Ms. Carson, I broke away, but we can come back to it. And I was going to ask for an assignment for the December, if there is a topic that the project committee, subcommittee needs to take up in December.
That's probably something we could talk about offline a bit as the mayor's transportation work group progresses as well. They have narrowed down their project priorities some,
Okay,
and that may be something that we want to introduce to your subcommittee.
so is that something you and I would discuss offline in the next week, 10 days?
Yes, sir, that's fine.
All right, let's do that. Okay. Got ahead of myself, excuse me. Okay. So, school zone subcommittee update, we'll put a check in that box. Ordinance and Development Subcommittee update. Okay. Take it away.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't know when you said take it away if someone else was speaking, but us that are remote can't hear anything.
All right, so I think you have to be almost on top of the mic.
That's much better.
So,
How about now? Oh, that's louder. Okay, so anyway, we had our group meet and discussed jurisdictional issues, and we wanted to hear from ACHD. We're going to give them another month, and then we're going to try in December to meet again and go over options. Meridian Police was not represented at our meeting again also today, so we'll try that again in December and try to understand their goals to improve the enforcement of this kind of activity where these vehicles are on the roadway and probably should not be. But we will, we needed to see, you know, what standing the city has to enforce either a regulatory regime or a ban or whatever we decide. We're still discussing options about all this. And so that's what I had from our meeting, really. It's, we went into discussions of state title, state code, and a lot more detail than we need at this level. But we just want to, what our goal is for December is to meet again and try to get a framework of what direction we want to go and what if any kind of ordinance might be drafted. And hopefully we'll have a draft ordinance to look at to present to the commission in January, I hope. But we'll see if we get that far that fast. That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Leclerc. Any questions or comments for Mr. Leclerc?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster?
I need a refresher, Commissioner Leclerc. Remind me the relevance of the controlled access versus not controlled access road. Help me remember where that fit in.
Okay, and again, we're talking about all-terrain vehicles and utility terrain vehicles. So these are we're still not here. Okay, and so the those vehicles are on the roadways, and our Meridian Police Department is engaging those folks, so letting them know they are not a street legal vehicle, and because we have no criteria for that. The controlled access issue is ACHD believes they have controlled access. They control access to all streets in Ada County. We have state code that says local governments have purview over their streets, and so we want to hear from ACHD and see if they what their official position is on this, and have them cite some legal standing and clarify that issue. And another thing our discussion brought around was controlled access, we think, means different things to the state of Idaho and to ACHD. And we are working that out. We're going to try to get a unified answer to that question. So those are the challenges we've run into with this ordinance, if we choose to make one. So that's, does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
All right.
Very good. Anything else for Mr. Leclerc's subcommittee or the subcommittee that he chairs? All right, we'll put a check there, and I asked Ms. Carson to put item 6, subcommittee procedures, as we discussed last month. We're still getting our sea legs under us, if you will. Procedures or protocols for subcommittee. I think the general framework, which was observed this afternoon, is that neither subcommittee is in a position to issue a report. And I say, if you're in a position to issue a report, that is when that information comes before the commission. So the formality there is to work within the subcommittee to develop information, to be able to issue a report. Then that is properly noticed for our meetings, and then that can come, or that item, that report can then come before the Transportation Commission, properly noticed in a meeting, and then open for discussion. And an item that we can act on, whether that's a resolution or a recommendation to pass on to city council, or what we do with that. But again, I say, Ms. Carson and I have had this conversation. We're still filling out what the roles of the subcommittees what their duties are. So at this point, if there are comments or you have thoughts on how we develop the subcommittees, I'd open it up for those comments.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Ms. Carson?
So not so much comments on how you proceed with your subcommittees. That's your decision as a commission, but just some housekeeping items. As you mentioned, the meetings do have to be noticed. So subcommittee chairs will need to let me know if you plan to call a meeting. Those don't always have to be called the day of a transportation commission meeting, but I do need to know if you plan to have a subcommittee meeting so that I can notice it at least 5 days in advance. So I would like to know at least 7 days in advance. I think that's a fair amount of time. The other issue is that you're welcome to set an agenda, but we will need some agenda topic brief, as you've seen in your meetings so far. And then also minutes will need to be created and sent to me so that I can post those as well.
Very good. And keep in mind, Miranda and myself, along with the mayor and Mr. Hood, we've been meeting at least 1 week prior to the regularly scheduled Transportation Commission to set the agenda. So informally, Mr. Steed has engaged in that process to reach out and provide some information that I can then take into the agenda meeting. So keep in mind, there is that opportunity no later than a week before. If there's an item that should be discussed or get on the discussion board, please feel free to reach out to me so that I can take it into the agenda meeting. Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster.
if I may, I have a couple
May.
questions about these subcommittee procedures, if you will. I guess first a question, if I may ask it of Miranda. So Miranda, I appreciate this guidance, I guess. So does this come from, I mean, this is a question, it's, but, part of our wanting the subcommittees to exist was so that we could have some informal business, right? So is this some feedback from legal department, or, where did this structure come from, I guess?
Yes, Mr. Lancaster, it is feedback from legal that we do need to notice the meetings and then also have minutes. Those minutes can be brief. For example, the last ordinance meeting, we had a 1 page of minutes. So it can be a brief minutes, it can be a brief agenda, but we just need to let the public know that we're having those meetings.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, a follow-up and then I'll stop.
Sure.
Regarding agenda, again, keeping the idea of the subcommittees being fairly informal, I'm going to hope, and hopefully you can confirm this, that we don't need to necessarily have everything that will come up at the subcommittee meeting to be on the agenda, as long as we notice the meeting. Will that suffice?
That is correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I think both Mr. Lancaster, Mr. Leclerc demonstrated at this point, you're not yet, you haven't reached a formal report, or excuse me, a report stage, still gathering information, so. Very good. And the discussion is, as this goes on and we evolve or grow with these subcommittees, we figure out how best we can function in that venue. I'll put a check in the box next to subcommittee procedures and move on to staff communications, item 7.
So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Hood put together these staff communications, so I'll go over them briefly, and then if you have any more in-depth questions, I may have to get with him to get you answers. So on page 16, that's the joint meeting that I discussed earlier regarding Eagle and Amity Road construction. Page 17, if you remember last month, Spin was meant to make a presentation and they were having technical difficulties. They were not able to make that presentation. It is, a link to that presentation is in your meeting packet there on page 17. If you would like to go view that. It's not specific to our city. It's mostly just a presentation about their business. The bottom of page 17 is Chinden West 2020 construction updates. There is that major group of projects going on there in Chinden, and they sent a pretty in-depth update with some infographics that just really help explain what they're doing there. Page 19, at the bottom of the page, Compass set up an outreach call with the city just to kind of outline what our priorities are as a city and what Compass might be able to help us with. So those priorities are listed there. Mr. Hood thought that that might be relevant information that the commission would be interested in, what the city's priorities were as they relate to Compass. Some of those will be, or all of those are transportation topics there as well. And then Compass, when they responded, did also give us some more resources. And that's just if the commission wants to dive deeper into any transportation topics. At the bottom of page 20 and all of page 21, there's some links to more transportation related resources and trainings. On page 22, there's a string of emails regarding the definition of controlled access highways for the ATV, UTV discussion. Mr. Leclerc touched on this already, what the subcommittee discussed. As of now, ACHD staff is understanding access controlled highways one way, and they're wanting to check with their legal department to see if the legal department is understanding that state ordinance definition the same way. And so we're still waiting on a resolution from ACHD legal. And as soon as we have that, I'll bring that back to the Transportation Commission. That string goes on through page 21 and the top of page, or I'm sorry, through page 23 and the top of page 24. On page 24, there's an email from John Wardle that's just discussing that Brighton will be modifying the fence that we discussed a few months ago at Bainbridge to be 10 feet. So if you remember the discussion we had, I believe it was in August regarding that fence, that there were some noise complaints. That fence will be modified to be 10 feet. Then going down from there, there's another email chain from Sean Martin. Last month, we discussed the 10-mile Chinden light was a passive permissive yellow. That's no longer passive permissive yellow. So rather than have it on as an agenda topic, we put in the staff communications. It is a resolved issue. And that chain goes through page 25. And then the last chain here in the staff communications, page 26 through 28, is an amendment to the STAR agreement for Meridian Town Center, more colloquial known as the Village. There is an amendment to install a new traffic signal at Village and Eagle. The signal will be limited to protecting southbound left turns. So that's something that in the past ITD has been more strict on, but now they're going to allow that. And that's the end of that staff communications item, if anybody has any questions.
Questions for Ms. Miranda on staff communications?
No questions, just one comment.
You bet.
Just in case anyone's curious, the Spin PowerPoint, it's mostly just their business model. There are a couple slides, if you're curious, of like their app data overlaid onto Meridian, like a map of Meridian about like app opens and ride starts, etc. So if you're curious about that data, that is in there as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other comments? Mr. Leclerc, it'd be interesting to, as that develops, controlled access. Because I note in the statute that there is a prescription or a prohibition for these vehicles to be on controlled access roads. And so that'll be interesting to get some additional information on that and how that plays out. Okay. Look forward to your report. Staff communications, that gets us to future meeting topics. Downtown alleyways, I see Lindsay Browser is looking at December, maybe January for her discussion. Has that been firmed up?
That has not been firmed up yet. I'll reach out to her this week,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Project Review Subcommittee, that's the subcommittee that I chair. As discussed, I jumped ahead. Miranda and I will be talking over the next week, 10 days, as to topics that may come up, and if we need that December meeting. Eagle Lake Hazel to Amity, January, February time for Harvest Transit Service, a comprehensive plan, and then the Main King Crosswalk. Mr. Steed, do you see any other topics that we might want to put on future meeting topics?
No, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Carson?
I will also add the ordinance group decided they will meet again in December. So they will have another update on the December meeting, as well as the roundabout and alternative intersection education that Mr. Lancaster will bring forward in December.
Great. Okay. You'll get extra credit for that.
I'll expect pay raise, Mr. Chairman.
You'll find candy next to your computer.
Ooh,
Okay.
I like candy.
Any other items for our consideration? And I'm not trying to get crosswise with legal. Any other thoughts or considerations that we want to bring up to another meeting? Okay, our next meeting is December 7th. All things considered, I may report back how I'm called to jury duty that first week in December. We'll see how that plays out. One, if we are seated. Two, if what the health condition is, and then how I answered the questions on the jury questionnaire. Well, there's an interesting one because it says within the last 14 days, have you come in contact with someone who has tested positive? And I have conducted business with 2 people who have recovered, but that's not what the question asks. So we'll see how they come back because I anticipate a call from them. Anything else? We'll stand adjourned upon a motion being made.
So moved.
Okay. Second, we'll see the commissioners back on the 7th. Thank you.
Have a good week, everyone. Bye.
You keep doing that. I will be there for moral support.